From AATH, the Association for Applied and Therapeutic Humor, this is Laughbox, the podcast for laughter and humor professionals. Here's your host, Chip Lutz.
Well, here we are. It's time for Laughbox, my favorite time of the week, and perhaps yours too. For those of you who don't know, I've got two podcasts. I've got this one that we do for AATH. I've got my own that's called Leadership Happy Hour. And once in a while, I get to talk to a guest that traverses both communities. And that's this guest this week, Daphne Scott, where we talk about mindful leadership. We've had a lot of people on the show that talk about mindfulness, applications and such, but nothing really that kind of fits how to be a mindful leader. I learned a lot from our conversation about how to take mindfulness and put it into play to be a better leader, be a better person. I know you're going to get a lot from our conversation, so get a pad and paper, pencil, something to write with, because you're going to want to take notes. So enjoy. Well, hello, friends, and welcome to Leadership Happy Hour. This is Chip Lutz, the unconventional leader, and today is another great day. And on this show, I get to talk to super cool people, and today is no exception. I get to talk to Daphne Scott. She is a leadership coach. She is an expert in mindful leadership, which is going to be kind of our topic today, which I'm really stoked about. So welcome, Daphne, to Leadership Happy Hour. Big cheers to you, my friend.
Chip, thanks so much for having me on the show. I was really excited to be with you today. And I just love the unconventional leader that you are. And I'm really excited to be on the show today. So thanks for having me.
Oh, stop it. You had me at hello.
Well, I do what I can. If I'm being completely honest, what really got me, and another reason I was excited to be on your show today, besides your dynamic personality, is the libations part of your show. So
well, most people don't realize that, the way I came up with the concept of the show is on Comedy Central, I love the show Drunk History. And
yes.
One day I was sitting around thinking, you know what? I really would like a show where I could drink and I could just talk about leadership with people. That would be the perfect storm for me. And so, the birth of Leadership Happy Hour.
There it is. Well, I like it. So it's all
ta-da!
So happy to be here.
Well, for my listeners, if you give them like the 411 on who Daphne, which I don't really know that many Daphnes. Awesome name, by the way. So
thank you.
Who Daphne really is?
Well, what you should know is that it's the name Daphne, the highest in popularity it's ever gotten was 465th, and I believe that was in 1963. So it's not a very, I've stuck with it. I lived with it. It seems to have worked out okay. So that's a little bit about my name. Now about me, so I am a leadership coach. I really specialize in, creating mindful teams and mindful leaders. I like to say that's all that I do, and work with teams and organizations. Primarily I work with wide scale integrations, really working on culture integrations and mindful leadership with teams throughout the organization. So that's really where I spend my time and what I get to do. And I'm blessed to do it and grateful that I get to do it. So that's awesome. My work in the world, Chip.
That's it right there. Now, and I want to talk about mindful leadership, and because I'm familiar with the whole mindfulness concept, but I don't know how it applies with leadership in teams, and I want to talk about that because it's fascinating. It's a fascinating concept to me. Before we get into that, I would love to just get our conversational juices flowing by just asking you kind of a random question.
Okay.
So, Daphne, what is your jam? When you really need to motivate yourself, right? What is your go-to music? Is it like Quiet Riot, Come On, Feel the Noise? Is it Bruce Springsteen, Born in the USA? What is your go-to jam that just really gets Daphne like, woo, let's rock on. Yeah. What is that jam?
Okay, Chip, my Midwest roots are showing now because my all-time favorite band is Rush. So you just need to know that going in. Now there's a little bit of a connection there. I still do play, but I am a percussionist, a drummer. So I think when you play the drums, you really can't play the drums and not fall in love with Neil Peart, who is the drummer for Rush. So, there's definitely an affinity there. And in terms of the song, what song by Rush? For sure, Limelight is in my top 10 of their songs, followed by 2112. So there you go. You had
There
to
you
ask.
go. That's your jam. Well, everybody's got the jam that they go to. The one that just like, whoa, yeah, let's partay.
Yeah.
Let's do this stuff, right? So
Yes, for
and
sure.
it might vary on the mood that you're in or what kind of mood you're going for.
It does. Yeah,
Everybody,
it does.
like when I used to do mail outs when I was in recruiting and
Yeah.
in the Navy and I had to do mail outs, it was like the whole Born in the USA album. I would throw that in. I would do like 1,000 mail outs and the whole time I would be like, yeah, do it, Bruce. You got it. You
You can do this.
That's right. Almost died from licking envelopes. The poison on there, like George.
Born in the USA playing in the background.
Exactly.
Classic.
Glory days turned into gory days.
Yeah. So that's my jam. That's my band. But I have a lot of different musical interests and music that I appreciate.
That's awesome. Now,
Yeah.
did you drum in high school too, or were you like a percussion?
Did.
All right.
I did from the time I was in 5th grade.
Nice.
All the way through. Yeah, and I still play music, and me and my brother still play. My brother's a guitarist, and so we still play. And we do a little 4th of July jam for my family every year, and that's the one gig we play a year.
Man, I want an invite to that. That would be awesome. I love I love live music, so I'll bring my string bass, and we can just get. There you go. We can get it going on. There we go. Yeah. That's awesome. I couldn't be in the marching band with the string bass. It just doesn't. It doesn't carry well.
No, it's hard to drag around, but it is amazing. It's an amazing instrument.
And in high school, I had a 1974 Gremlin. That was my car, and I could fit my string bass in my Gremlin, but it took some maneuvering. I'm just saying.
A lot of maneuvering.
Yeah, I had to put the front seat down, take it in the back, put the neck. Anyway, I'm going off on a tangent. So let's talk about mindful leadership.
Let's talk about that.
Let's start here. I mean, so as a concept, we'll start there with like the whole the concept of mindful leadership, and then we'll get we can talk a little bit how you got into it, and then how we apply that into our leadership lives. So let's start there.
Yeah, well, so I'll talk to how I got into it. Okay, great question. There's two parts of leadership that I think are, when I work with leaders and I work with teams and organizations that are, they'll make this distinction between leading and managing, and you've probably heard a lot of that. And really what I started to look at is, what are the transactional skills that leaders need to have? I mean, this is a important, how do I delegate effectively? How do I, organize myself, right? How do I keep track of all the tasks and the projects? And there's sort of this real world part of that can live in the transactional, sort of this, the what are we doing and the who's doing it and the how are we doing it, and those sorts of parts of our lives, which all leaders need, all managers need to have those skills. And then there's this other part that lives sort of the way that I like to think about it in the transformational bucket. What is this part of me as a leader and even as a manager that knows that I'm dealing with the hopes, dreams, and aspirations of other people, right? As I'm making decisions, right? So and leaders are faced with decisions. They have decision rights over a couple key things in organizations. One is who gets on the bus and who gets off. They usually have hiring and firing decisions, right?
Yeah.
They have decisions about how people use two of our most invaluable resources, time and money. So if I'm a leader, even though I might know how, I might have the skills of delegation, and I might have the skills of, maybe I'm a great, interviewer, I can do great interviews, that sort of thing. It's one thing to have that. The other then in the transformational bucket is to know where I'm making decisions from. Mm-hmm. So am I making decisions from a place of fear, or am I making decisions from a place of trust? Am I making decisions with my greatest intention and motivation being to maintain my security, my control, my approval? Or am I making decisions from a place that are creating win-for-all solutions? And getting leaders to pay attention to that, how they're actually, and really what that is pointing to the context, how they're relating to all the things that come into their lives and the decisions that they need to make, is a whole nother part of the practice. And that's where mindful leadership.
That seems... Well,
how was that?
that was a lot, but what resonated with me was some of the transactional versus transformational concept that that you're making the decisions from differing points of view. that in my own leadership life, I was always like to think that I've taken, a bigger picture approach.
Sure.
But in retrospect, the question always remains, did I really, was it really about the team, or was it really about, me and, moving this, this one transaction forward?
Yeah, exactly. And there's been, several books written about this type of thing, and you mentioned the word ego, bringing the ego into it, and how do we work with that, and that at the root, that's really what it's pointing to, and how we're relating to things. And it's real easy to say, check your ego at the door, easier said than done. And so we start making this distinction then between, practices and mindfulness, and why we might want to incorporate them into our daily lives, and then making a distinction between mindfulness and meditation. So, what it is to have a meditation practice then, which is a different thing than just mindfulness,
All right. Well, okay. So let's talk about that, the whole mindfulness piece. Cause I have another podcast called Laughbox, and, I do for an association, and, I had a mindfulness expert on there, Nick Mosca. He was a professor at Harvard, and we talked a lot about mindfulness, and, and I think that sometimes mindfulness gets this rap of where you got to burn incense and
right.
stuff. And he was really cool about the whole thing. He's like, sometimes mindfulness can be as simple as just taking a moment to, like we were talking about our favorite jam, right? Taking a moment and listening to a certain line, within the music, that instead of listening to the whole thing and getting wrapped up there, just like concentrating on that one piece in there, and letting your mind just focus in on that.
Yes. And my favorite definition of just mindfulness in general, and I think what you're pointing to, Chip, is making that distinction between mindfulness and formal meditation. I think when we think of meditation, meditation is a way of training the attention. Mm-hmm. It's a way of, working with our attention and getting in touch with those deeper parts of ourselves, which could live under the umbrella of mindfulness. But there are many mindfulness practices, one of which you just mentioned, right? Mm-hmm. So mindfulness, my favorite definition of that comes from John Kabat-Zinn. And he says, mindfulness is paying attention on purpose in a particular way, without judgment, paraphrasing some of his definition. And I really like that. That's really what he's pointing to is, it's a way of paying attention. We're intentional about it, about where we're putting our attention. And then we're doing it in a way without judgment, which is the toughest part for everyone. It's sort of, we have an experience and we judge the experience. It should be different. It shouldn't be going the way that it's going, and as soon as we do that, we constrict, and now we're right back where you were just talking about, making decisions from a different place without taking the whole picture into consideration,
Right. I'm super judgy. Yeah. I'm super judgy.
Yeah. I mean, it's a thing for all of us. Yeah.
I'm just being honest. I'm super judgy. I mean, I don't mean to be. It's just, I'm walking down, I'm in the airport, and I look at people, and I'm like, oh man. They certainly don't have the same kind of mirror I have, because if they had the same mirror I had, they wouldn't be wearing what they're wearing today.
Right. Exactly. And it's like when I hear people say, like, I love to go to the mall and people watch, and I'm like, yeah, me too. And then I'm like, oh man, I just know that I'm the person that inspired another person to say, I just love to go to the mall and people watch. I just know I'm that at some point, I know I've been that person.
That's fantastic. Yeah, exactly. I've been that person that people love to watch at the mall. Yeah, exactly. That's beautiful. Exactly. That is beautiful. Now, I think that, all right, so leaders live like really busy lives. I mean, I don't think it's ever been more so than today, because we have so many. I mean, I remember, 20 years ago, you could actually go on vacation. I mean, you didn't have a cell phone. You didn't have email. Well, maybe had email, but you didn't. I remember the first time I had email was 1996. That's, 22 years ago, but you got like 2 a day, right? I mean, it wasn't that big a deal. You had email. It was like, oh, somebody would send you some stupid joke. It wasn't like it is today. And that you could actually be separated from work. But now, work is such a part of everything, and you can't really pull away from it, that I would think that just the whole mindfulness part would be very, very hard for most leaders today.
Well, you're pointing to something that I think is pretty rampant and typical in our culture, our culture that really values ambition and getting ahead and moving forward. And what I like to say to leaders, so let's talk about busyness. I like to think of it this way: busyness and boredom essentially are two sides of the same coin, that there can be a very unconscious part of us that wants to keep ourselves busy. We don't like to sit still for very long. Typically, leaders that I work with, they have this sort of, and this is where mindfulness actually can become very helpful. They have this part of them that really is compulsive about moving and keeping themselves busy. So what they get to avoid is the experience of what they would classify as boredom. Or worse, what they get to avoid is actually their feeling of anxiousness and restlessness. It's pretty uncomfortable for most of us to be able to have that feeling of restlessness. So the easiest way to deal with that is just to keep moving and not to take pause and not to rest and not to renew ourselves. And so we end up really in this loop, right, of just feeling like telling ourselves that we can't take time off, telling ourselves that we can't take vacation, telling ourselves that we can't unplug for a day, that we can't put the phone down. And if we really look closely at it, what we find is, and don't take my word for it, just check out your own experience. But what we find is, it's a way that we relate to the idea of time, that we won't have enough. And so this is really what I'm pointing to, or help us if we have too much, we have to face our boredom. So, and this is really what I'm talking about, when we talk about mindfulness, is it's really taking a look at how we're relating to our work, how we're relating to the stuff. I mean, I'm just as guilty as the next person of having a task list that looks like it's, 100 miles long.
Right.
And how I relate to that is what really matters. If I start having a belief that I can't step away from it, or telling myself that if I'm not involved in everything, the world will fall apart,
right.
That I won't have enough time. And typically, there are just a few things that people, especially leaders and organizations, consistently complain about, which is, I don't have enough time, I don't have enough money, I don't have enough resources, I don't have enough people on my team. And so what you start to hear is this real energy of not enough. Right? There's not enough. And if you start to look at that closely, what you see is it's just really a way that we're starting to relate to things in our life from a place of not enough, versus seeing that we actually have all the time in the world that we need.
So are you okay, so I just want to make sure I'm understanding. So, well, seriously, so are you saying that we need to shift our mindset to and I don't want to sound all like The Secret, but shifting our mindset to more of one of abundance, where you have to shift our mindset a little bit and relate to things like, I do have enough time, I just have to look at this differently. Is that what you're saying?
Sort of, yes. So on one side, I am saying that. And on the other side, and I think I love what you just said about, let's not get too high-minded here, right? Let's be practical. I'm a pretty practical person, right? At the same time. So at the same time, and that's where this transactional part of this comes in, because at the same time, there are skills that people need to use. I'll give you an example. I love to ask leaders if they make lists. And almost every leader I work with is absolutely. They figured out enough that you can't keep everything in your head.
Right.
You gotta write things down. And then I ask them how many lists they have. And typically they have 3 or 4, right?
Do you have the list of stuff that you've already done that you put on your new list, so you can so you can cross it off and make yourself
feel better about things? Exactly. Right.
I have that list.
Yeah, exactly. Almost every leader, and they're like, "Yeah, I have 5 lists," right? And none of them are organized anyway. And then I have them do something with their list where I have them look at it, and I have them start making a distinction with the things that they wrote down between what things are a project and what things are actually a task.
Mm-hmm.
And a project is anything that requires more than one step. So typically what they have on their list are a bunch of projects. And so every time their mind looks at that thing on their list, it's your mind knows oh my gosh, this is going to take me 3 hours to get this done.
Right.
So what's it do? It goes to the next thing on the list. And what it's looking for is just the one thing that it can get done.
Right.
The one task, right? So I mean, that's pretty transactional in a sense that it's not, it's a skill. It's something that has to be learned over time.
Mm-hmm.
And it supports the transformational part. So yeah, I am absolutely a fan of mindset. I'm absolutely a fan of looking at what's really happening, paying attention to how we're relating to things. At the same time, I know there are actual learnable skills that leaders can learn that help that. So it's both.
All right. And I want to get into those, some of those things that people can learn.
Yeah, sure.
And I want to see how that kind of relates to, because when I was going through, all your stuff, something that really resonated with me was the concept of work-life integration versus work-life balance. Because I'm a firm believer that balance is bullshit. In that, I do. Because, if I'm saying I'm balancing, that means I'm borrowing from Peter to pay Paul, which usually pisses Peter off. It does. I mean, it does. You know, I mean, if I'm like, look, it's like I got all this stuff. I got to like take away from my home to like, do stuff at work. Well, that's going to make home mad. And if I'm like, oh, I've got to do all this stuff with my kids and I can't do the stuff at work, well, then, work's going to suffer. And I really like the thought process of, how do we integrate things and how do we make it so we're not constantly stressed off and we're not, feeling like we're torn between two lovers.
Yes. Yeah. Well, okay, great. So I'm glad you brought this up I too have an issue with the idea, the concept. So like balance. One reason you just mentioned, if we're balanced, it means we're static, we're not moving sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
You can't, right. And it's just a false dichotomy. So I'm alive. And then when I'm not, I'm at work, which means I'm dead. I don't, so it's just, all of it is our life.
Right.
So, right. It's a role. So my role at work, Daphne, leadership coach, that's one of many roles, by the way, that I play in life,
Oh, that's not your only one?
It's not the only one, it turns out, Chip. It's not. It's one. But you would think, right? To hear people talk about it, it's like when we talk about leadership, you're like, okay, it's the only role this person has in their life. This
is all I do. I'm seriously just, I record podcasts all day long. This is all I do.
Yeah, this is it. It's your whole life. It's the only thing you do. So in my experience, when people talk about work-life balance, what they're pointing to is they want to have the experience of their mind and their body being in the same place at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So that when they're at home, they're present with their family, they're present with their friends, the people that are important to them. Most of the people I work with, the leaders that I work with, they want to be successful. They love their work. And so therefore, also when they're at work, they want to be at work. They want to be thinking about work. Unfortunately, what happens is not that. So to your point earlier, when they're at home, they're working, they're thinking about work. They're consumed with what's going on at work. And even when they're at work, then they have to deal with things that they didn't get handled at home, sometimes. So really what I find is what's more true for people is they really they want this experience of what's it like for me to have my mind and my body in the same place at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And what does that feel like? And if I'm going to choose to work when I'm not at the office, knowing that it's a choice, not a have to, not a should. Not sort of that place what we were talking about where, I feel like I'm doing this out of fear and from anxiety and trying to control things or trying to, maintain approval, as some examples. So I like integration. I say marry it all, marry your work, marry your life, bring it all into relationship so that you have a healthy relationship with all of them. And I talk about, really these 5 relationships that leaders need to have. First is with the self. Mm-hmm. Having a healthy relationship with yourself, healthy relationship with money, healthy relationship with time, healthy relationship with friendships, which I find friendships the most interesting of all the relationships we have. And, your relationship with everything. So that's really how I look at this integration of work and life. It's all life.
And that sounds great in concept, but how do you put it into practice? Because, if you're looking at being where you're at and not having your mind someplace else, that can be hard. Like looking back on my life, I mean, I think about I have 4 kids, they're all grown now. Okay. And it wasn't until later on in life, the song Cats in the Cradle really started to mean something to me.
Oh, I bet.
Because I remember like my youngest son. I mean, that's when I was like, things really started to resonate. I was like, hey, you want to go do this? And he's like, I got to do this. I'm like, cats in the cradle, bitch. Cats in the cradle. You need to do this. You're going to make time for me, damn it. You're going to make some time. Yeah, but I was like, and so, looking back, there were things that I wish that I had been where I was at, but I was always like, oh well, I've got all this other stuff. I got to get this here, and my boss is doing this. I've got this. I'm consumed by this. And then when I was at work, I was like, oh well, the kid's got this coming up. I really should have done this. And how do you be where you're at?
Yeah, I mean, it very valid, excellent question. How do we put this into practice, right? What's the practical application? And I think the first place is really, and this is where self-compassion comes in. I think the first part is to look at, some of what happens for us, our common humanity. We all go through this. None of us are immune, right? Mm-hmm. To having to manage these things, manage our life. And then, looking at in the mindfulness part of it comes in later, but then looking at, how do we give ourselves a break? Sometimes we're not going to do it perfectly. Right. I am sure, you said you had 4 kids. I am sure you look back and there were certain events that you're like, dang it, and it was really funny to give perspective. I heard Julie Louis-Dreyfus just won the Mark Twain Award for comedy, and she was talking about being a working mom, in theater and in comedy. And she said, you worry like you're going to screw your kids up because you weren't around and, you took too much time away. And then you win the Mark Twain Prize and it's totally worth it. So perfectly.
That'll pay for the therapy.
Yeah, exactly. So I do think it's these moment by moment decisions that and this is where mindfulness comes into the whole thing. It is sometimes these moment by moment decisions that we're making. Mm-hmm. It isn't an all or nothing thing. To your point about being balanced, it isn't. And so how aware we are. And again, I think when we really are practicing the mindfulness part of this, recognizing always that we are at choice. We are always at choice. And so often we tell ourselves that we aren't, and that's where this, I have to do this, or I have to be at this meeting, or I have to go on this business trip, or I have to, and not looking at, wow, I actually can make some choices here. If I'm going to go on the business trip, knowing that I'm choosing that for a very specific reason, mm-hmm. and being good with that within ourselves and talking to our kids or significant other or families about that in a way that makes a lot of sense to them, that it is something that we're choosing to do, that it isn't something that we have to do, which is very different.
That is very different. Mm-hmm. And that whole, I want to say self-forgiveness piece for making mistakes, that can be a difficult portion for, looking back. Cause I know that for me, I can ruminate about things and beat myself up about stuff that, it's done. What's done is done. And, I screwed the pooch on that, but I still beat myself up for it.
Yeah. And, you have to look at what when we're doing that, again, we're really not getting anything out of it. It's really creating what I call a character assassination against ourselves. And we don't like it. It doesn't really work. Right. So we have to get willing to try something different, to say, okay, I did make a mistake, and owning that with ourselves. If there's another person to owning it with them. And then really asking ourselves, how does that inform our life going forward? What did we learn? There's, in my experience, the only reason to go into the past is to get the learning and then get out of there. The mind wants to drag you. That's its sort of untrained state, is always in the future and always in the past. So if you spend, again, you can check it out with your own experience, but if you spend enough time in the past, you will start to experience regret, and you'll have an experience of regret. It's this really fascinating thing. If you spend a ton of time in the future, eventually you will start to experience anxiety. Mm-hmm. So it's just a sort of an interesting phenomenon that happens for us. And so, going into the past, get the learnings. How does this inform my life going forward? And then choosing from there, I think, is the best that we can do. And that is a big practice in self-compassion.
That is great advice right there. That is awesome.
Thank you.
Well, absolutely.
And we'll be right back with that interview with Daphne. But now it's time for Fun Facts. Fun Facts is where I share facts about humor, laughter, sometimes the absurd. But since we're talking about mindfulness, this week's tip is on mindfulness. And it is, mindfulness improves our ability to focus and make decisions. A 2012 UCLA study has discovered that long-term meditators have larger amounts of gyrification, try to say that 5 times fast, or folding of the brain's cortex compared to people who don't meditate. Gyrification increases the surface area of the brain and enhances neural processing. This may imply that regular mindfulness practice can only lead to improvement in the way the brain processes information, makes decisions, forms memories, and so forth. So, you want to be smarter? Hey, be mindful. So, let's get back to Daphne.
But something you said on there that I think was really, really key, and I don't want to glean over, is the whole living too much in the future, that anxiety piece. Because worry can be a bitch. I mean, because you're thinking of, instead of being in the now, and really, even whether you're at work or you're home, you're thinking about, because I'm a planner, right? And I think that looking forward ahead, 2 months, 6 months, a year, okay, I have these things going on, and that's always suited me well. However, the flip side of that, it can also cause me to worry a little bit. Like, oh, what if this doesn't happen? What if that doesn't happen? What if monkeys fly on my butt? You know what I mean? you know what I'm saying? You have all these scenarios that really are never really going to play out.
Right.
And that you worry about, so it's almost like, a good and a bad, where it's good to be, for me, it's good to be a planner and plan ahead, because it's been always suited me well for my success. However, it's always caused me a lot of anxiety on the worry portion. How do you get past some of that?
Well, I think, again, Chip, whatever your name is.
Call me Cliff. That is so funny. For those of you who are listening, we had a discussion ahead of time about just names. And
somebody call you Charlie?
Yeah, and that Daphne listened to the podcast ahead of time, and she knew who I was. She actually knew who I was and knew my name, because I've had a few guests that have called me by my last name. So she did that. She did that for fun. So
I had to do it. Yeah. I had to.
Cliff.
Well, you bring bring up a good point. Okay, so what you're talking about is making a distinction between, planning is. This is one of the reasons, I think we have been given this a beautiful gift to think and to what they call prospect, right? Mm-hmm. Like they think we're pretty much, every time psychologists and scientists say this, they get proven wrong, but, they think we're the only species, if you will, on the planet that really has the ability to prospect, to really plan our future, right? Mm-hmm. That we're not just driven by instinct. Okay, so that's great. So, it's very helpful. It's like today, it was helpful for me to know we were going to meet at a certain time, and you sent me an invite, and I do some preparation, right? Like that's helpful. Mm-hmm. What you're talking about then is, and you used the word earlier, which was rumination. What you're talking about is where we're letting the thought process take us. I like to say this to people. It's like thoughts come and they go. We think that our thoughts are bothering us, but really we bother them because if we would just leave them alone, they would show up and then they would leave,
Right.
But these thoughts pop up like, monkeys flying out of your butt. And then which by the way, I just love that example. We get attached to it. And we start thinking about it. What if these monkeys come and, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? What if I'm at the store and that's when they show up and they start to fly out? And oh my gosh, how am I going to explain this to my friends? And, and then where can I go? Should I wear bigger pants? I don't know how,
I really like how you yes-anded that whole thing, that you took it to, that was beautiful. That was a beautiful thing.
I'm doing, but it's such a great example because it sounds so ridiculous, but take any thought and input it in there. Yeah. And then that's what we do. Right. So I think we recognize like the brain it's doing its best to keep us safe. Like it's just a prediction machine, and it's trying to say, okay, this is, I remember one time I walked into my house, I opened the door and my TV was gone along with my stereo and my computers. So my house wasn't as I had left it. Mm-hmm. And, your brain, when I opened the door, it expected, right, to see the house in a certain order, in a certain way. And when I opened the door, it wasn't that way. And immediately it's like, whoa. This is not how you left it. This is bad. Of course, my house had gotten broken into. Mm-hmm. So, our brain is just trying, what's going to happen is trying to keep us safe. But when those thoughts kind of start getting the best of us, we start latching onto them. That's when we start to experience a lot of anxiety. Yeah. Versus intentionally planning things, which is a good thing.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
So if I want to be a mindful leader, what are some like good practices for me? What are some things that I can like these are things I need to do to, be more in the moment, be there for my team. Because I find that like I always used to try to, cut out time for my team to spend one-on-one time. But even when I had one-on-one time, there were still things that sometimes I might get preoccupied with, and I wasn't really there in the moment with that person, which I think would be a big portion of being a mindful leader, of actually being in the moment when you have a moment.
Yeah, it is. I would agree with you. And there are very simple things when you do have that time face-to-face with people, and I'm talking like really simple things, like don't pull your phone out. Like just look at a person in the eye and talk to them and be as present as you can be in that moment. That's a real gift in acknowledging people. In terms of practices to really work with, sort of the natural propensity of the mind, which is to drag us into the future, drag us into the past. I am a huge fan of gratitude and appreciation practices. Mm-hmm. And I did that for a year of my life. There were 5 pennies in my right pocket, and my goal every day was to have 5 appreciations. And every time I appreciated someone or something, I moved a penny to the left pocket.
Wow.
it is really a practice, because if we can understand how we're wired, in a sense, like we are just prone to this negativity bias. We look for things that aren't going well, and leaders do that pretty reliably. Like they don't need to worry themselves about not paying attention to the monthly KPIs, like that's naturally, you're going to look at that. Mm-hmm. And you don't have to worry about paying attention to the things that aren't going well. You're naturally going to do that. What we need to do is learn to shift our attention to, okay, what can I appreciate? And it's a real simple practice, and it has major impacts on people and on the individual practicing it, as well as the people around them, because it creates a lot of positive emotion. And positive emotion is what opens us and allows us to have a greater perspective. So it's kind of this broaden and build theory idea from Barbara Fredrickson. So that is one of the practices that I think people working on a daily basis is really powerful.
That is fantastic. And just because
it's simple, right?
It is so simple. 5 pennies.
5 pennies.
You just move them over. That is great. Now, all right. So this is like a big question for me. All right. So you're talking to that person who you really want to be in the moment with, but they have that voice or that personality that you completely just drowned out. So after 10 minutes, you've had a conversation with them, right? You've had a conversation with them, and you've been shaking your head the whole time like you've been in the conversation, but really your mind has been on a beach in Barbados someplace.
Yeah.
So how do you like, and I don't know what this is not everybody. there are a few people I can think of that as soon as they start talking, I am just completely someplace else. And I really I in my mind, I'm like, no, pay attention, Chip. And then I'm like, potato chip. Oh, I love potato chips.
I can't wait to get home and go get a bag. I should go get a bag right now.
So how do you pull yourself back into that conversation with that person that just like,
yeah. Well, this is a big question. So
do you pinch yourself? Do you have like electric shocks that every time you start to drink, you use little negative reinforcement?
Well, I'll come back. So this is a big question. So I'm gonna answer it in 2 ways. Okay. So one is, there can always be personality things that, we can create an aversion within ourselves around, maybe a person's voice or, whatever. Those are, I think, simple things for us to get around. Like we can recognize when you're talking about judgment, right? Mm-hmm. That we have a judgment and we can own it and work past it and very simply shift ourselves like, okay, this is a human being over there who has his or her hopes, dreams, and aspirations, and probably worthy of me to pay attention, right? Bring ourselves back. The other part, though, that I find that is more common is where something hasn't gone well in the relationship. And the person has withdrawn out of the relationship. The two people really aren't connecting. Mm-hmm. And that is what is creating the disconnection in the moment. So the only way to work with that is to really get complete is if the person has what I call a withhold, is to be willing to own that they have a withhold, that there's something that's been unexpressed and they've gone out of connection in the relationship. And by the way, I'm talking about work relationships, right? So it can be any relationship, but even at work, but they've gone out of connection in a relationship and they've been holding on to something from the past that is not allowing them to stay present with the person, like right then and there. So that's a much bigger practice, that I work with teams on, because that happens pretty reliably. Something, and it's not uncommon. I mean, this is just so common, where someone will say to me, I'm really having problems with so-and-so. And, we haven't been, I just can't, he's not, we don't have any trust in the relationship anymore, and so on and so forth. And I said, well, when did all this start? How long have you worked together? Oh, 5 or 6 years. When did this all start? Oh, 3 years ago. They're telling me a story that's pretty recent. Right. But when I ask when the relationship, like, when did you start having problems? Oh, 3 years ago. And, and here's where it gets really crazy. I mean, okay, are you ready? Because this is where it gets really crazy. 95% of the time when I dig on those, it is usually some place where one of the parties has broken an agreement with the other party, or they didn't have a clear agreement to begin with. Mm-hmm. So, they didn't get the person, and this sounds so crazy, they didn't get the person the report they needed on time, or they weren't clear about what was happening with a promotion, or they weren't clear about, it's usually like these things that there just wasn't clarity to begin with. And then the person starts to make up a story about what was actually happening.
Right.
And it just morphs itself into this, huge thing that goes on for 3 or 4 or 5 years. So,
And they start making connections of stuff in their head that really aren't real connections of, the why of whatever happened. And then subconsciously, then when they go to talk to the person, they negate whatever the person's saying. And then that's why I go to a beach in my head.
That's right. So that's, what I call withhold, withdraw, project.
See, I just always thought because they were just super boring and I didn't really want to listen to them.
Well, sometimes that could be the case, I mean, here's the thing. I don't say to people like, you have to love everybody,
right?
Or rather like everybody. You don't. I mean, that would be sort of crazy making to say that, but you can definitely respect people, and you can definitely, for your own sake, save yourself.
Right.
For your own sake, allowing yourself to be present really has a lot of gifts just for ourselves, which ripple out to the world too.
What's funny when you were talking about, they were talking about when did this start 3 years ago, and I started thinking, I was like, man, they should have gone through couples counseling. They should have couples counseling at work. Well, do you imagine your boss coming up to you, it's like, well, we're going to send you and Paul to couples counseling. Yeah, that would be.
Yeah, I can actually. I mean, they don't call it that, but that's what it is. It's conflict on teams. I mean, it's a big deal, and it costs organizations a lot of money. I mean, and I mean, man hours and all the things that come along with that.
Well, I had a friend of mine I heard speak one time, and she was talking about people at work that people are messy, organizations are full of people, therefore organizations are messy places.
Yeah.
That you can have the best policies, best plans, best procedures, but because people are involved, stuff's going to get messy. That's just the way it is, because everybody's got the agendas, everybody's got their things that they come to work with, their issues. So
absolutely,
the whole couples counseling thing, that's awesome.
I love it.
That's great stuff. Daphne Scott, the work couples counselor.
The work, actually that might be the next thing. That might be my next iteration. It is funny when I work with teams. They do. It's on more than one occasion. I've gotten that comment like, "This is like therapy." I'm like, it is.
It's exactly like therapy.
Because here's the thing. Like I don't know many leaders who wake up on Monday morning. They're like, I cannot wait to get to work and have the crappiest time with my coworkers.
Oh my.
Like no one's saying that.
Right.
They want to get up. They want to be effective. They want to do well in their jobs, and they want to have a good time doing it. Hopefully, so
right.
If they're listening to this show, they want to, right? So.
That's so funny. I want to go to work and deal with the most difficult people ever.
Yeah, ever.
Well, what's so funny is because within our society, we do romanticize the whole leadership role. I mean, we're like, when I get to be a leader, things are going to be so awesome. Oh, I'm going to have the streets going to be lined with gold. I'm going to have eggplants for every meal.
Eggplants.
I just threw that in there. Anyway, but. Quite frankly, I mean, it can be a huge pain in the ass because, I mean, not only do you have your own crap you're dealing with, you got to deal with everybody else's crap every day. Oh, well, just like with your kids. Oh, he's touching me. He's on my side of the seat. Oh, there's no fruit pies in the vending machine.
Yeah. Why are we eating this? Can't we have that? And that honestly, that is one thing, Chip, that I really do work with leaders on is not taking more than their 100% responsibility.
Oh yeah.
Right. Not heroing things, not trying to fix everyone's problems. It is a big deal because typically that's how they've gotten promoted to begin with.
Well, it's a facet. I mean, I want to say it's almost a facet of servant leadership is that when you grow up and you grow up a servant leader and you're used to serving your people and giving 100%, you can tend to take on too much that whenever somebody comes up with something, it's like, I've got this. All right, let me fix it for you. I can fix it for you. All right. And then, that doesn't do anybody else any favors.
No,
because, delegating develops, letting people figure out their own problems develops them. I mean, if you're looking at, you can't nail yourself on the cross and be Jesus for everybody. You cannot, because it's, you are not Jesus. You can't save them all.
That's right. And that, that is a pattern that happens in leadership pretty reliably.
Yeah.
And again, coming back to what you were mentioning earlier around, how do people get this experience of integration in their life and get this experience where they can be home when they're home and at work when they're at work. And what you typically find is that leaders have gotten themselves, no one told them to do it that way, but they've gotten themselves stuck in that pattern of taking on too much responsibility. right? And thinking that they can save and really believing that they're supposed to do it that way. So that is an absolute recipe for significant unhappiness in leadership. And the leaders that I know, like there's one thing that I have found that really creates great leaders is that they love leading. They love managing people.
That's what I tell people all the time is that, there are all these things that you've got to get used to. All the things that, like I said, that aren't the romantic side of leadership as far as like repeating yourself all the time, dealing with everybody else's problems. But if you have a heart for leadership and really wanting to make a difference for other people, that trumps everything else.
Totally.
Trumps all that other crap that, you have to deal with because, you really love the difference you can make for other people.
That's right. That's exactly it. Developing other people and teaching. And, I think those are the parts that really, really can, when leaders can learn some of the specific skills they need to have and they can get those on board, then that allows all of that to happen pretty seamlessly for them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I tell you what, Daphne Scott, this has been like the most fun. This is the most fun I've ever had with my clothes on. This has been
that means a lot to me.
A fun conversation. I mean, and really, really insightful for me on, being a mindful leader. I mean, great tips, great information. I really appreciate your time. Now, if after today, people want to connect with you, want to get themselves a little Daphne Scott, where do you want them to go?
Yeah, they can check out 3W's Daphne-Scott.com, and there's a //LHH Leadership Happy Hour.
Well,
so check that out. Yeah.
Awesome sauce. I even like that better. Cool stuff.
I like that even better. Yeah, I do too. Chip, thanks so much for having me. It was
absolutely. Well, we're not done because if we were really at a bar drinking, I give you some kind of drunk dare.
But since no,
we're not. Okay. I'm just going to ask you a few random questions from my Overstuff Would You Rather book. And they are random. Where I open the book to is where I open up to. So I will apologize in advance if any of them are a little too bad. So are you game, Daphne Scott?
Oh, yeah.
All right. First question of 3. Daphne Scott, would you rather for the rest of your life only to be able to make left turns or right turns?
Right turns.
Why is that?
So much more efficient.
I'm glad that you have an answer for that because I was like, why is that? So maybe you have an answer.
What I'm tell you. So I used to work for UPS way back in the day.
Yeah.
And when they design their driver's routes, and I'm sure almost every logistics company does this, they avoid left turns as much as they can because they're slower and they're more dangerous actually. So you're more likely to get into an accident. So right turns.
Interesting.
Yeah, I'm going to be in a lot of trouble if I have to.
I did a little time working for UPS loading trucks back in the day.
So did I back in college.
That is like hard work. I do not want to go back to do that ever again.
Hard.
Yeah. And then I remember the guy that I worked for. He was such an ass. You'd be like,
what, really?
Well, yeah, because it's like, you're when you're first learning, because everything's numeric, as far as getting in the right place, and if it's not in the right place, the driver's got to look for it. And you make some mistakes, right? And then the next day is like, I had to look all over this package. Like I was doing the best I could. Sorry.
Yeah, you're like, sorry, buddy. I'm reading a label backwards. You do it.
Yeah. Hey, all right. Second question. Would you rather, Daphne Scott, have to hitchhike with strangers to get anywhere or have to wear or use diapers and depend on strangers to change them?
I'm going to go with the hitchhike with strangers to get anywhere.
Okay. I'm with you. That's cool. I don't even have to ask why on that. Last question. Okay. Would you rather have to drink a cup of hot bacon grease or someone else's spit?
I'm going to go with someone else's spit.
Okay. I'd say I'd go with the bacon grease.
Would you really? But you're going to have to deal with the burns, the burning, Chip. I mean, the skin peeling and the. Yeah.
I'm sorry, just the word bacon makes it okay.
Well, that's
just true. Like today, my brother called me. He's like, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm making some fried cabbage." He's like, "I don't know if I'd really like that." I'm like, "Well, I said I cook it in a little bacon grease, some bacon." He goes, "Oh, what you're really talking about is bacon with a side of cabbage." I'm like, "Yes, that's what I'm talking about." What?
Bacon flavored cabbage.
Exactly. Hey, well, thank you so much for spending a little time with me today. It has been a lot of fun and a lot of great information.
Well, Chip, it's my pleasure. And I want to thank you for having me on the Leadership Happy Hour. And I had a blast. Thank you.
So So what'd you think? Daphne Scott, absolutely awesome. That's why I had to share it on this podcast as well. I mean, I originally recorded it for Leadership Happy Hour, but I thought I've got to air this everywhere. Daphne Scott, fantastic. I'm going to encourage you to go to her website, check her out. Super smart, super fun person. Just enjoyed that so much. I'm also encouraging you to go to AATH, the website, aath.org. Check us out. If you're not a member, be a member. If not, why not? Now is the time. Our conference next year is in the Big Easy, New Orleans. Plan it. Be there. So until next time, this is Chip Lutz saying, we'll keep the laugh on for you.
This is Laughbox, the podcast for laughter and humor professionals. Laughbox is made possible by a grant from the National Speakers Foundation and is brought to you by AATH, the Association for Applied and Therapeutic Humor. Find out more at aath.org. Be sure to review Laughbox on iTunes. For show notes and more information about today's conversation, visit laughbox.aath.org.